Welcome, 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 all of you from all over the world. I want to thank you so much. I'm Tom Russell. I'm your host for Life Without Limits, and I am so grateful to be able to come to you and offer some insights, not from me, but from some incredible guests that I have the privilege of having on my show. And tonight we have Corbie Mitleid. Got that correct, right, Corbie?
You did. You did.
Awesome, awesome. So we are going to go forward, but before we do this, I want to make sure that if you missed any of my live shows, you can go to my website, lifewithoutlimitsshow.com, and scroll down to the very bottom, and you can either click on the iHeartRadio, where I have over 130 shows, or my YouTube videos, which number is around 40, and you can subscribe to my YouTube channel. That would be great if you can do that. And also, if you are interested in reaching people from all over the world with your business, you can also be a sponsor for my show. And if you're interested, just give me a shout out to my email address, lifewithoutlimitsshow@gmail.com, or just go straight to my website, lifewithoutlimitsshow.com. So, having said all that, I want to bring on Corbie. She is from New York. Can you tell us where you are in New York?
Yes, I'm actually upstate, about an hour west of Albany, in a tiny little county called Schoharie, 30,000 people and a bunch of cows and sheep.
Oh, beautiful. That's beautiful. That's the way people have this misconception in Indiana. It's a Midwestern state that it's all farm town. Although
Mhm,
there is, it's not. It's far from that because I live close to Notre Dame, so
mhm.
we have our share of urbanism. So I'm going to get started with Corby, but I want to give you a little bio, folks, of what what she's all about. Corby is she's always been a different one, and when you hear her talk, you're going to see that she's different. She's a very talkative, and I like that in a guest. She's a writer and visionary in a completely medical family. Father's a doctor, mother's a nurse, brother was a doctor, and she's always made her own path rather than take one cut for her by others. And she's leaving an Ivy League university after 2 years. Corby struck out to find more joy and purpose lived, regardless of what she was told she ought to do. And I could go further with her story, but I want you to hear it from her. So we want to go back a little bit with your family, if we could,
Sure.
Corby. You told me when you were growing up that your mother was emotionally abusive to you. But how did that work? Can you explain that?
Yeah, she did the best she could, but she was an alcoholic cross addicted with barbiturates.
Mm,
And she I mean, she was loved by her family. But when she met my father, and she was from Norfolk, Virginia, and dad brought her up to meet his family, this was not what my grandmother wanted my father to marry. She was first generation American. Her parents barely spoke English, lived above a store. My grandmother wanted someone well to do, smart, college, etc. So she looked at my mother, she looks at my father, she says, "How could you do this to us?" And that was it for the next 38 years. My grandmother, just anything my mother did was wrong. And so my mother was emotionally beaten down.
mm,
Along comes me, and I've got my father's intellect, his creativity. I had, by 11, I had a Dolly Parton figure, and she always thought that she was an ugly woman. So there I was, her daughter, who was everything that she wanted to be, but wasn't.
mm,
So she attacked me. And I understand now, she's been dead almost 40 years, that it was because she felt so threatened and she felt alone in her inadequacy in the house. My brother, yes, he's now world famous in cystic fibrosis and asthma. He went to my father's college, my father's med school, and there was my mother with a high school education. Um, so it was always putting me down. It was always accusing me of doing outrageous behavior that I never did. But when you get battered with that at 16, you kind of think maybe your mother knows something about you that you don't. And so after a particularly heinous exchange at 16, for the next 20, 30 years, I lived out my mother's fears. I figured that I was pretty worthless. All I could do was whatever I was told sexually. I mean, it was nothing. I mean, I was still the genius me, and I was still a writer, but I couldn't find what I wanted to do with my life. I went from job to job to job to job to job. I was never out of work because I could always land on my feet, but it was never what I really loved. I mean, I've had a checkered career: actress, author, inspirational speaker, video producer, legal assistant, executive assistant, headhunter, wrote for a comic book series. Some of them were lovely jobs and I enjoyed them, but it wasn't me. What was me was the intuitive work that I started doing at age 18. I mean, we were all hippies in 1973.
Mm-hmm.
I bought my first tarot deck from Spencer Gifts, James Bond,
Spencer
007
guess.
character
Holy
deck.
cow, that goes back.
I was working there part-time in high school.
Yeah.
And I read for 20 years because I loved the stories that were being told. All of a sudden, in 1994, I could do hands-on healing and talk to dead people without training. Basically, the universe had said, all right, you've cleared yourself out enough. You're going to work for us.
Mm-hmm.
And I did that part-time. Mom died in 84, I think, and my father remarried to a wonderful woman in 85. But a week after when the towers burned in 9/11, it was a week after my father had died. I just watched that and I turned to my husband. I said, I need to do this psychic work full time. Somebody out there is going to need to know there are other answers. It's not all darkness and fear. He said, I believe in you, do it.
Mm-hmm.
So for a year, I still worked 70 hours a week as an executive recruiter, did the psychic work evenings and weekend to make sure I could make a living at it. 2002, shut the door on corporate. I've never looked back. I now work 6 days a week, 14 hours a day. I read 1,000 people a year. I'm in books. I've written books. I get to get up every morning. I don't have to get up every morning. And that's huge.
Now let's go there because I don't remember you telling me. I think you told me about the being a psychic and everything. There's a lot of misconceptions. There's a lot of myths about all these things.
Oh, honey.
So yeah, that,
yes.
So how do you dispel some of that stuff?
I read for them. I am not what I call glurpy purple with angels. I am as dead dog practical as you're going to find. My whole thing is here are your opportunities and how to grab them. Here's the tough stuff. Here's how to get through it or around it. Here's your toolbox. Go rock and roll. When you sit down for a reading with me, I'm a certified tarot master. Like I said, been reading for 50 years. I will say to you, what's the most important thing you want to get out of your knowing? Because even if I speak really fast and you're with me for a half an hour, if I'm talking about your career and your family and maybe some past lives and finances, and what you really wanted to know about was your youngest child, and I don't get there, you leave and say, oh, she was terrible. She didn't tell me anything. Yeah. So we find that out. And I tend to give what I call deep dish readings. If you wanted to open up a vintage clothing store, let's say that, I would not flip a few cards and say, well, wait until January and fire the second redhead. What the hell does that do for you? Yeah. It would be a card for you, a card for the energy around the business, the brick and mortar location, how to market it, clients, competition, staff, finances, what you need to know, and best possible outcome. All of that gives you empowering information. And I teach my clients not to ask yes or no questions. Right. If you come to me and say, well, is my new business going to be a success? I look at you over my glasses and I say, what if I say, no, you're going to lose everything and live in a box under a bridge? Wrong question. Yeah. You ask, how do I make this business rock and roll? Now, that's an example of the fact that I was an executive recruiter for years. I know how to handle people's careers. So I have that extra knowledge to put into my readings. The way I explain it, spirit, God, Ralph the Wonder Dog, whatever you want to call it, looks in our personal file cabinets to see what we've got. And that's what we get good at. For instance, there's a pendulum. That's a little crystal on a little string. People hold it and they get yes or no answers. I have a slight benign tremor in one hand, like Katharine Hepburn had, so I don't trust it.
Mhm.
But what's my background? Theater major, so I know characters. I'm a writer, so I can tell a story. And I'm a history freak. I met my husband at a flying museum called the Old Rhinebeck Aerodrome. And as he says, there was this gorgeous brunette who could tell the difference between a Fokker DR1 and an F1 based on the wing skids. I had to marry her. Okay. So with all of that together, I am very good at past life retrieval, figuring out who you used to be and if it affects you now.
Yeah.
So there are other. Go ahead.
Sorry, go ahead. Well, I was just thinking, because you see these things on TV and movies and stuff like this about a psychic. They I want to say this. They try to listen to what someone is saying, and they want the other person to think that they're by what you're answering to them is what they're actually. They want you to hear what you're saying, right? Does that make sense? That doesn't make sense. I guess what I mean basically is you've got the power of the listening, and you listen to them first, and then it's almost like a counseling session with these people, right?
Some of it is, but then I'm a reverend. I'm a non-denominational. So, if a girl comes to me and says, I'm not sure about my guy, Bruce, I'll do a reading. But if I hear that he abuses her, she's battered, the wiki-woo hat comes off and the pastor's collar goes on, and I will counsel that girl because no, if you're battered, you leave. You don't keep giving them chance after chance. So yeah, but let's take a look at the past lives, because then it's a little different. We don't need to know all of our past lives, or we just like sit and watch a movie. We wouldn't live this one. But there are times when people have difficulties or obsessions and they don't know why. 2 examples. A woman came to me and said, I'm really worried about my son. I mean, he's in his late 20s. He doesn't want to live a mile further than a mile from me. And he always checks with me about important things. Is he ever going to grow up? Why does he do this? Is it past life? And I go, okay. And I said, I'm seeing you on Utah Beach. You're his commanding officer. He's got a leg mangled from some shrapnel. You're dragging him behind a dune. You get hit yourself, but you both make it off alive. And so there's this level of gratitude. And she gets very white and she says, what was my rank? I said, you were sergeant. And she sits in her chair and goes, he has called me Sarge since age 3, and we never knew where that came from. Now, I couldn't have known that. Another woman she was, Midwest, but she was fascinated by the Underground Railroad during the Civil War. And if you will, I go upstairs, light trance, and I say, okay, I'm seeing a room. It's a whitewashed room. Ceiling is pretty low. A couple of taller gentlemen, they're in there and they're bending their heads so they fit. And you're kneeling by a little rickety iron bed. And there's a little old Black woman in it that she's dying. All of you are very, very sad. Looking at your dress, it's about 1862 or 3. It's gray serge with some black soutache on the edge. And the reason you're all very sad is she didn't make it to Boston, which is where she wanted to be at the end of the Underground Railroad. And she tried so hard to get up from Georgia. And I opened my eyes and the woman is shaking and crying. She says, I've had that exact dream for 20 years and I never knew what it was about. I can't fake that. I'm sorry. There's too much detail and it's too precise. It's the same thing with my mediumship. I do not fish because it's way easy to fool you. I see a woman. Oh, it's your no, your grandmother's not dead. How about your mom? No, that's cousin. Yeah, it's your cousin. Forget it. Yeah. That's what I call the Madame Hoon-Haas. Yeah. So I'll get your dog tags. I will find out the person you want to speak to. Example, my father, Jerome Richard Dorkin, who died in 2001 at the age of 80. Notice that tells me nothing about the person. But then I will tell you exactly what I get. And my guides kind of play charades with me. If I put 2 fingers toward my mouth, they smoked. If I put my hands toward my chest and move out, they had surgery. If the heel of my hand hits the top of my head, it was a fast death or unexpected. So, two examples. A woman wanted to speak to her father-in-law. All of a sudden, I feel myself miming a pool cue. He had taught her how to play pool. Another woman wanted to speak to her grandfather. Immediately, I feel myself salute. Now, if you see my hand, the palm is out. That's the way Canadians and Brits salute, as opposed to palm down, which is American. This was in Canada. She had just graduated from the Royal Canadian Mounted Police Academy, and her grandfather was acknowledging it with pride.
Mm-hmm.
She hadn't told me that. But those are the kind of things, not it's a rose, she loves you, but things that are absolute. Sometimes it's literally vocal. There was a woman in York, Pennsylvania, wanted to speak to her husband who had died 6 months before. She had not told me he was a Texan or that she had lived in Dallas. But all of a sudden, I feel my hands go out and my head tilt, and hey, baby! That's how we walked in every night after work.
Mm-hmm.
Those are the kind of things, as John Holland, a very famous medium, says, we're just the tube.
Mm-hmm.
We're not doing it. We're just the person who gets the information. And if those things can give healing and closure to someone, why would I not be humbled that I get to do that?
Do you ever feel like someone's trying to trip you up with different things?
Always,
Always?
always. Oh, sure. I mean, there's one guy who leaned across my desk at a trade show, Psychic Expo, and said, why didn't you tell me something you couldn't know about me? And if you're right, I'll have a reading. And I smiled and I said, I'm sorry, I don't roll over and fetch either. And I turned my back and he did not get a reading.
Oh, that's good.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Respect.
Yeah.
Another one said, can you eat later? My wife wants a reading now. They didn't get a reading either. I am not what you order up like a latte or a burger or a car wash. I am a human being and a professional, and you will respect me. And if you do, I will give you the best damn reading you've ever had, but only then.
Where do you think it comes from? I mean, these visions, I mean, is it like a vision?
I see it like a movie.
Yeah.
Yes, I do see it like a movie.
Do they give you any information ahead of time, or how does that work? When someone walks in the door and says, yeah.
I just told you.
Yeah.
If you have a reading with me by Zoom, I mean, I have clients all over the world.
Yeah.
Somebody from Bolivia does not want to come to Cobblesville with the sheep and the cows.
Yeah.
I will find their name and their birth date because I'll run a numerology report for them. Now, what's numerology? Astrology, we all know, date, time, and place.
Yeah.
Numerology is your birth date, but the letters in your name have a vibe. And the reports I run usually have, 35, 40 pages. How do I know they're good? Well, when I first started dating my husband, I did a compatibility chart for the two of us. And the first 5 minutes is, this is, bull and da, and then there's silence. And then 20 minutes later, he walks into the room where I am holding the report like it's a dead rat. It's like, I don't like this. It's too accurate.
Yeah.
Now, the one thing I'm going to say is, remember, even the best of us are only 85% accurate.
Yeah.
The only 100% accurate is God, and he's not doing phone readings or psychic fairs this week. So there you are. Yeah. But there are all kinds of tools I can use. It's what will give you the ability to move forward in your life. That's my job. Not to amaze you with my wiki book.
Now let's go back, because I wanted to discuss this, because you've obviously hit your lane over the past decades. But going through your 20s, you always talked about you were living in poverty. It was a challenge for you. How did you deal with that?
I didn't know any better. I mean, Dad was an upper middle class, lower upper class Jewish doctor.
Yeah.
The typical 1960s. But when I dropped out of college, I was dating the guy that became my first husband, and he was still at Penn. And his family said, well, if you're old enough to live together, you're old enough to support yourself, and totally cut him off. He was at Penn because his father was professor. So that was free. But in 1974 or 5, we were living on about $8,000. Then it was not great.
Yeah.
Living in an apartment known as Rape Central, 42nd and Osage in Philly, with hot and cold running roaches. at the same time, we were doing medieval and Renaissance reenacting, and that, when you're just a secretary, everybody kicks around, and you get to swan around like a baroness or a countess or a queen on the weekends, you get kind of skitsy.
Mm-hmm.
And that's pretty much when my family felt, well, she's always going to be a failure. And I was always the black sheep. I was pitied,
Mm-hmm.
but,
Did you feel like you're the black sheep?
always. I'm the
Yeah.
rebel. Remember, everybody in my family would discuss medicine around the table. I could tap dance and discuss Shakespeare. Nothing.
Crickets.
So, job after job after job. The first marriage lasted less than 1 year. When he started hitting me is when I left. Second marriage, about a decade later, lasted less than 2. This whole time, I was dealing with who I was. The cancer started in 1989. It was ductal carcinoma in situ, which means it was there, but it hadn't bought its bathing suit, gotten its tour guide, nothing. So 4 lumpectomies and radiation at Sloan Kettering when I was working 60 hours a week for a lawyer and acting. That was interesting. And then got it again, skin cancer from the radiation in 2000. So they were scarred, they were misshapen, but they were still there. Then I found my Carl, the right guy. Finally, after a couple of bad biker boys, I ended up marrying a guy that's a dead ringer for Father Mulcahy on MASH.
Oh, I can't see you with someone like that.
Oh no! If you see the pictures of us, we're that cute. It'll tough rolling everybody. So for a year and a half, I had we were madly in love, brand new marriage, no kids. And then I got my second primary, which turns the danger clock back to 0. But the doctor said, okay, 3 strikes, you're out. We're taking the rack. We're also taking the ovaries to cut all of your hormones so that you're going from this Dolly Parton figure to this fat power plug with permanent side effects in 3 weeks. Suck it up. And you're not allowed to take anything for any of the side effects because you had cancer. So, suck it up. We'll give you an antidepressant if you want it. Yeah.
Was that the kind of bedside manner, or just this is your?
Oh yeah. No
kidding.
No. I had 2 surgeons. One who was the cancer surgeon, one who was the plastic surgeon and did the implant reconstruction. And the guy who did the demolition work had the personality of a desiccated turnip. But my plastic surgeon, we referred to her as Madame Artiste and Doc Miracle because she was, and she makes them. And I worked with her from 2004 until about 2017 when she moved to Chicago, so I can't get to her anymore. But a wonderful, wonderful woman. Anyway, so there I was, had no idea what was going to go. Yeah, did I go home and cry for 24 hours? Of course, I'm human. But I knew, based on all the work that I had done on myself and with some other, like the Option Institute, I had to find 3 reasons to be okay with it. I said, okay, number 1, you don't have them. You can't get cancer there. That's a good thing. Number 2, the top half is not going to get slammed in the refrigerator door at the doctor's, and every woman listening knows exactly what I'm talking about. 3, implants. Cool. I'll be perky till I'm 93. So I got out of Mass General in 3 days, shopped for a bathing suit in 5. That was in 2004. Clean since, knock wood. This is what 66 looks like. And the whole thing is, I live the examined life. This is the thing I can't escape. What do I need to learn from it? For me, and particularly then, what do I need to do to teach with it next?
Now, did you feel like, learning the diagnosis the first time was bad enough, but you went through 3 times? Did you ever feel like you're living on borrowed time?
Nope, never. Because I know why. And that, again, is the psychic work. We come down here with a pre-birth plan. What do we want to learn? Now, how can you have a pre-birth plan in free will? Everybody always asks. Same way, you go to college, you are going to be a physics major. That's your pre-birth plan. And you can either take gut courses or double major plus lab. easy life or hard life, that's the free will. So I came down here knowing that I had to learn to respect being in a female body. Remember when I told you about the 20 or 30 years that I just let myself be handled with so much trash?
Right.
Basically, the universe was saying, look, you simply can't handle the Dolly Parton figure very well, but we need you down there to teach. So we're going to remove the problem. Problem was removed. I look nothing like I used to, but it means that I have to love the entirety of who I am. And my value is now based on wisdom, humor, compassion, and charisma. I walk into a room to do a lecture and boom, right there. So this life will be successful, even if I had to do the cancer dance 3 times.
Yeah, explain it. Yeah, what's that cancer dancer thing you're telling me about?
Okay.
Okay.
It's very simple. I will not say I fought cancer, because what you fight fights back. And I am not a survivor because I do a lot more than hang on by teeth and toenails. A cancer dancer finds out how graceful they can be under pressure, avoids getting their toes stepped on, and gets off the dance floor in one piece. I danced for the cancer 3 times. I'm done. Next. And the other thing is, I won't do Susan G. Komen. I won't wear pink anything because that was part of my story. But it's done now. There's so much more that's interesting. I don't want to always identify myself as, oh, the girl who had cancer. I care less. Talk about, oh, this is the girl that's written books. This is the girl that reads 1,000 people a year. This is the girl that's, finally at 20 years married. That's what I want to talk about.
So if someone's going through cancer, what do you suggest how they approach it? I mean, because not everyone can have that same kind of perspective as you. I wish they could, but a lot of times they don't.
Well, what I'll say is not everyone does. Can they?
Oh, yeah.
Don't ever say that they can't, but they may not. The thing is, realize the strength that you have. Don't try to do it alone. Ask questions. There are 2 articles on my website. One of them is being a co-conspirator is better than being a patient. Get involved in your diagnosis. Ask, what about this? What about that? What about the other? Use alternatives as well as, I'm a belt and suspender girl in that, yes, I did a lot of visualizations and I used some alternatives, but I had the cancer surgery when I needed it. I had the radiation in '89 when I needed it. And don't be afraid to ask for help. The other article on my website is being a light companion on a dark road that you can print out and give to people so that they're not constantly asking you the wrong questions. Don't say, what do you want me to do for you? Because when I was in the middle of the radiation, I was exhausted. I could barely think. You offer, I will do your grocery shopping for you every Wednesday. I know that it's exhausting you to walk your dog. I'll make sure my daughter comes over and walks the dog for you. I'll take you to chemotherapy. Listen to what the cancer person wants. You may have wanted flowers and chocolates, but if what they want is tomato soup and dirty jokes, that's what you get them. You listen, because those are the things that will help the cancer dancer keep dancing.
And having a different perspective about this thing. Because you already said that you didn't look at this as that you're 1 foot in the grave, because that's you can't live a life like that, and I don't know how you did that. So what you were a psychic throughout all this, right? Or were you?
Yes.
So
yes.
How did that help you out through all this?
Well, in 1989, I was still reading cards for friends, but I wasn't doing the work yet.
Yeah.
In 2000 and in 2004, it was a matter of figuring out what the message was and how I was going to live with it. I admit, I went to 5 of the best medical intuitives in the US to find out when they first told me what was up. They found microcalcifications. They were going to do a biopsy, so we didn't know anything yet. And 4 of them said, oh, you're going to be fine. Pat, pat, pat. And the one that got it right is the woman that I consider the best medical intuitive in the United States. Her name is Stacy Wells. She said, sorry, kid, it's cancer. It's this kind of cancer. You have it here and you have it here, and this is what they're going to have to do. She can literally look into the DNA of the body. She was 100% correct. She and I are now very close friends. She and I are both do the pre-birth planning work and the soul plan readings from Robert Schwartz's book series. We're both in it. But I also did a lot of meditating. I was not supposed to die from this. For one thing, it was literally microcalcifications, tiny, tiny, tiny. When after I had the double mastectomy, I sat down with the oncologist and said, well, look, if we do nothing, 80 to 85% chance, 5 years, please. I said, not good enough. What else you got? She said, well, we could do tamoxifen. That'll really shut down all the hormones. That brings you up to about 90, 92%. And I just closed my eyes and listened. And upstairs says, yeah, that's good. I said, fine. And then she said, we could do chemo, but it would only give you about 1 or 2% more. I said, And then it was, and we can also take the ovaries, which really ups to, like 98%. You're good. And I let them do it. Unfortunately, this was a case where the oncology surgeon, I don't want to say she lied, but I said, look, can we just take out one ovary to see how I adapt? Because I wasn't in menopause at this point. She said, oh, no, we're taking them both. Menopause is the same for all women, which was an absolute lie.
Yep.
All of my doctors say that I'm one of the worst they've ever seen, because here I am 17 years later, and I still have every single menopausal problem, insomnia, hot flashes, the works.
Even without ovaries?
Huh?
Even without the ovaries?
That's right, because the body no longer has any kind of hormonal regulation. So I will get a hot flash at the drop of the hat.
Yeah, my wife does.
Yep. And, I don't know how long it's been since I slept for more than 2 hours without waking up. And no, I'm not going to take Effexor, which is the antidepressant that they recommend. For one thing, I don't know what that's going to do to my abilities up here. Not chance in that. So I white knuckle through life, and I figure it's just something I need to learn.
So you transitioned to something else, because we talked. It's been a while since we did the pre-interview, but you were talking about the Option Institute. What is that?
The Option Institute is the place that I have loved since 1984. And it started by Barry and Samaya Kaufman. They had a son named Ron. Ron was diagnosed as very autistic, IQ of 30. It's a vegetable, put it away. They said, no, we know he's in there. And so they devised something called the Sunrise Program. And they worked with Ron 12 hours a day, 7 days a week for 3.5 years, brought him out of the autism. Ron graduated cum laude from an Ivy League university. He now helps run the Institute and the Autism Treatment Center of America, which is partnered with them, married, happy, a force of nature, an amazing guy. So the Option Institute works a lot with what they call stimulus belief response. And what's that? That is, let's take a neutral thing, like outside, it's raining. Now, you've got 3 situations. A guy at the Jersey Shore with his kids. He only has a week and it's going to rain all week. So he's miserable. Me, I'm working on my next book. My cats are sleeping on the cat tree. I don't care. I'm neutral. Schoharie County farmers, where it's been a drought for 2 months, they're dancing in the mud. They're happy. So the stimulus is the rain. Belief is it's bad, it's neutral, it's good. And response is what you saw. Now, the key is to always ask yourself 3 questions. What am I X about in a situation? Depressed, angry, sad, afraid, whatever. Why am I X about that? And the question nobody ever remembers to ask themselves, what do I think would happen if I stopped being X about that? So let's take the guy out at the shore. What's the matter? I'm really disappointed at the weather. Why are you disappointed at the weather? Because I really wanted to take my kids out and show them a good time, and we only have a week. What do you think would happen if you stopped being upset about the weather? You know, I wanted to show him those Marx Brothers movies for years. Maybe this is a good time.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah.
And if mothers learn to use that with their kids, how many kids are so frustrated because we don't listen to them?
Mm-hmm.
Little Johnny comes home from school. I hate my teacher. Wow, what's the matter? I'm mad. Why are you mad? Because she gave us extra homework and I want to go out and play. Okay. What do you think would happen if you stopped being mad about the homework? I don't know. If you had to guess, maybe I'd get it done and I could go out and play. That sounds good. So you want to try and do that? Okay. Notice you have not told the kid you don't have a right to be angry. Oh, don't be silly. You haven't negated the kid's emotions.
Mm-hmm.
You've taught him critical thinking. You've validated how he's felt, and he comes up with his own answers for how to make it better.
So it's his idea.
Yes, it's an amazing process.
Yeah.
The way I talk about it in my book, Clean Out Your Life Closet, the idea of non-judgment is be a happy Martian detective.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. If you and I were sitting together and you had water coming out of your eyes, I might say, why are you crying? But I could be wrong. The Martian who has never been to Earth is assigned, go find out about Earthlings. And so he gets out of his little spaceship and he toddles over to you and he's grinning. He's so excited. He goes, why is there water coming from your eyes? And he might get a better answer because maybe you have allergies, or maybe your contact lenses are bugging you, or maybe there's an emotional basis.
Mm-hmm.
And my favorite story for that, there was a guy, he was married with a kid. He was in a bad car accident that basically made spin art out of his face. So he was always walking around kind of hunched and embarrassed. One night he was putting his daughter to bed. She grabs his face, smushes it next to hers, and says, this would be a good picture, but it would be better if mommy's face were in the picture. Now, before he learned about this, he would have thought, even my daughter thinks I'm hideous.
Mm-hmm.
But now he knows how to be a Martian detective and he turns it around. Why would it be a better picture if mommy's face were in the picture? And his daughter looks at him and blinks and says, because mommy can't hold the camera still and you take good pictures.
Mm-hmm.
Because he knew to ask and not judge and not think he knew ahead of time, something that would have been massively traumatic for him was completely avoided.
Mm-hmm.
Questions are magic. They always are.
Yeah, you got to look a lot deeper than what. So I think people are afraid what the answers are going to be.
Mm-hmm.
They don't want to hear the answers, or what they think should be the answers, and they're not.
The more open you can be to possibilities, the better off you're going to be, because somebody may think of something you never would have considered, but wow, that's really terrific.
Now, too many people. I wrote this down before we got the show. They take life for granted. How does someone not fall under that trap? I mean, you've lived a charmed life, from what I gather in talking with you. It may not seem
exactly
like a
but
well.
I've learned how to do roller coaster, no brakes.
Your perspective is a lot different, okay? But a lot of people they take life for granted. But how does someone not fall into that trap?
I think these days with COVID, it's pretty easy not to fall into the trap, because look, we've got a disease that can take you out even if you're healthy.
Mm-hmm.
There's a story recently about a kid. She was 10 years old, perfectly healthy, took her out in 5 days.
Yep.
We are in a state in America where we are so polarized. It hasn't been this bad since the Civil War. People are carrying guns. And, you may be living a perfectly blameless life, but somebody decides he's going to shoot everybody and you happen to be in the wrong place at the wrong time.
Mm-hmm.
Life has never been more precarious than it is now.
Mm-hmm.
So you have to wake up every day thinking, I got at least today.
Mm-hmm.
And you live it like you have today. Look, also, I'm 66. And when you've never had kids like I haven't, you're just the biggest kid in the room. And all of a sudden you look in the mirror and you say, who screwed with my face?
Mm-hmm.
I look like a grandmother. So you have to get to the point where you think like an elder. And what's the difference? I'm by chronological age, I'm a boomer. But stereotypical boomer tends to, we had the sweet spot, 1945 to 1980. We had opportunities that no one will ever have again. We were not worried that the world wasn't even going to exist, that it would be so awful we couldn't live on it. So for us to look at Gen Z or millennials and say, you're doing it wrong, it's this and that, I know better. Who died and made you God? I am working with an incandescent 14-year-old that I've been training as an apprentice, if you will, for 2 years. And so for her, I'm an elder. Now, what's an elder? An elder knows that we're going off the stage. We're going out of the spotlight that we boomers were used to our entire lives. We have to give the stage over to them. We have to let them take the spotlight and the first trench, if you will. We have some timeless knowledge that we can share with them from our life experience if they ask politely. And then if we find someone like I have found Ula, we give them everything that we know. And the relationship between Ula and myself, that's lifelong. That's why elder and apprentice. I adore her family. She's homeschooled, and our work once a week is considered part of her classwork. And I let her come up with most of the answers, because what we were talking about the other day, boomers, Gen X, we were inculcated with those reality shows where you have to be a victim and you have to be a loser or nobody's ever going to give you anything nice. So victimhood is, ingrained. Millennials and Gen Z, they know no one's going to be there to save them. So they're doing it all on their own already. Look at Greta Thunberg.
Yeah.
There's a big difference between the generations. And so am I aware that at 66, I may not be around in 20 years, may not be around in 10. I don't know. But I make sure that every day is worth something to someone.
You're fortunate to have someone like that, because across the board, I mean, when we're talking, I'm a baby boomer too. I'm almost 60. So I understand what it's like to try to talk with the Gen X or a millennial and try to impart some kind of wisdom, some kind of knowledge, and they look at you like you have two heads, unfortunately.
Did you wait until they asked you? That's the key.
That's the key.
You must wait until they ask.
Exactly, because you're trying to impart things that they really don't care about. They don't have their oar in that water, and they're just moving along in their own path, whatever path that is, and they don't look at the history. They just look at what's right in front of them. In fact, a lot of them don't even look what's further on down the road.
At this point, there's the old saying, those who ignore history are doomed to repeat it.
Yeah.
But it is literally unprecedented, like the word that I'm so sick of. We've heard it for years now.
Yeah.
But they have to learn to live without plastics, without fuel. They have to learn to totally change the world. There are animals that will never be existing. There are cities that will not exist anymore. In 50, 100 years, probably New York City will be gone. We never would have considered that. They have to. So we give them what they ask for, and we shut up and let them live otherwise.
Do you ever think about what legacy you'd like to leave? What was that?
Ula's my legacy. Even though Ula is my legacy, even though she's not my daughter, she is my niece by affection.
Yeah.
If I've given a different way of looking at life, if I've given strength, if I've given humor, if the books that I've written have something to still say to people 20, 30 years down the line, I did a good job. Yes, we reincarnate. The soul does over and over again, but the particular recipes, we only get one. There will never be a Corbie Mitleid down here again. There will never be a Tom down here again in exactly that form.
Yep.
So you live each day and you take it down to the rind and you do your best. And you realize in the large scheme of things, 200, 300, 400 years from now, no one's going to remember me. It's just a matter of what I learned and took back to my soul. That's all that really is going to last.
Oh,
And
speaking of the books, I'm sorry, I should have said this to somebody at the beginning, but the books that you've written are Clean Out Your Life Closet, The Psychic Yellow Brick Road, and You've Got the
right,
Magic.
who needs a genie?
Who Needs a Genie? Yeah.
Right.
Um,
Who's got the You've Got the Magic is actually a book that is very much for anyone who wants to go on the psychic fair circuit. So this is the niche book, but the two that everybody will want to read. This is the self-help, Clarity, Adaptability, Simplicity, and Making Friends with Stress. And the tagline for this is Good Psychic Guidance is Art. Don't settle for a forgery. This will keep you safe when you're going out looking for an intuitive to work with.
okay, got it. I want to make sure I didn't forget that. All right, Corbie, thank you so much for coming on my show, and you're very enlightening. I really appreciate it, and you've done 1,000 of these things anyway. So I hope that we were able to have a conversation that is unique. I'm sure there's some things that you might have said something you haven't said before, but it doesn't really matter because I've got a listenership that might not have heard from you. So I appreciate that. And I wanted to throw, I always try to throw some things in here about some core values. One was respect
Yep.
and one was courage. So tonight I want to talk about integrity. And there's some things about integrity I think are really important. It's our definition from 5-star life is about who you are when nobody's looking. So I found some things that define integrity. And there's a couple things. It says, integrity feels best even when it makes part of my life harder, even when it allows others an unfair advantage, even when it requires uncomfortable conversations, even when it exposes my weaknesses, even when it means I won't fit in, even when no one else will know the difference, even when it requires me to treat others better than they've treated me. And that's real important. And here's another one, note to self. You can't control how other people receive your energy. Anything you do or say gets filtered through the lens of whatever personal crap that they are going through at the moment, which is not about you. Just keep doing your thing with as much integrity and love as possible. And here's another one. There's no better test of a person's integrity than their behavior after they realize they were wrong about something. And a lot of people just do not want to admit that.
Yep.
And here's one. With integrity, you have nothing to fear since you have nothing to hide. With integrity, you will do the right thing, so you will have absolutely no guilt. And the last one here, it's real integrity is doing the right thing, knowing that nobody's going to know whether you did it or not. And I can't tell you, I'm sure, Corbie, you've done the same thing. You've done things that you did not want to get lauded for, right? And
Yeah.
I think that's real important. You know, you don't want to put yourself out there, hey, look what I did. You know, you just do it. You know, I could tell stories of things that I've done, and it's not important. It's just you try to do it with any knowledge. So, having said all that, I want to thank you again, Corbie, for coming on my show. And I know you're going to impact so many of my audience, and it's a really, really appreciated. And as I end all of my shows, I want everyone to smile infectiously, laugh genuinely, love unconditionally, live courageously. I believe in every single one of you. Have a great week, folks.